Terry, please. We're waiting on Renee.
Mayor Luizzaraga. Vice Mayor Powell.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Jewett.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Winslow.
Here.
Martin.
After the mayor said that the meeting was adjourned, I reviewed the town code, state law, and had a conversation with an attorney at the Attorney General's office. It's my conclusion that this is a properly noticed meeting, and that if a majority of the council wishes to proceed with this meeting, they may proceed. Item would be to move to approve or amend the agenda.
Okay. We need to approve
I
or
make a
amend.
motion, we approve the agenda from the second.
It's been, a motion's been made and second. Is there any discussion? Then we'll go to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We need to go to reports and announcements.
Okay, I have a couple here. Tomorrow night, that'll be Wednesday night at the Eatery. They will have another dessert night. And the proceeds from the dessert sold will go to the Queen of Peace Catholic Church. Pardon me, Queen of Angels Catholic Church. Queen of Peace Catholic Church Angels. Okay, that's who it's going to go to. Sorry about that. Okay, the second one on May 30th at 6 p.m. at the elementary school. There will be a school board meeting. One of the items that will be discussed will be busing students to the Salon High School. That's all.
Managers report, Alex.
The first item that is a result of the council asking me to research regarding the charter school. I have completed some preliminary research to determine where we stand now with the Scholars Academy Charter School and what options are available to us. I've met with Mr. McClennan, principal of the Scholars Academy, Ms. DeHaven of the Little Scholars Preschool, and talked with another charter school, Ed Options. I placed a call to the Arizona State Board for Charter Schools for more information, and was informed by them that if a charter school wishes to add a new school site, they must complete the notification paperwork, and the process takes 60 or more business days to complete. This means that it is possible to have a new charter school open at Quartzsite by the beginning of the fall semester. To summarize thus far, Little Scholars Preschool is funded largely by two grants, First Things First and Opportunity First. There are approximately 20 preschoolers attending the school. Scholars Academy Middle School and High School carries approximately $150,000 in debt and a bus lease, which would return to the leasing company. The Academy is officially closed June 30th, 2012. They have not yet made their lease payment to the town in the amount of $18,000 for this fiscal year. Mr. McClennan has stated he is relocating. The buildings will be vacant. Ed Options, a blended learning charter school, has been talking with the Scholars Academy about the possibility of locating a charter school here. In my conversation with them, I stressed the importance of a community school and the preschool. I have yet to speak with Salone Bicentennial Union High School or First Things First. I hope to complete the rest of this report by next week. Second is a para project. This is a grant for a study for transit service. Currently, the transit service is funded by the general fund, with vehicles purchased through an ADOT 5310 grant program. Our current transit service is what is known as an on-demand. Somebody calls for a ride, we go get them and take them where they need to go. With a para study, perhaps the town can qualify for a 5311 program, which funds the driver costs for extended fixed route service within the community. In the past years, the town received lottery monies from the state for operation of the transit service. Those funds were swept by the state with the advent of the economic downturn. We will probably not see those funds again. The para study was recommended by WACOG as a means of expanding our services by a study of unmet transportation needs and better transit service for our community. Lastly, in March, the council passed a resolution to direct staff to investigate voting irregularities. In compliance with that resolution, staff has requested the ballots from the March and May elections to be sequestered, made, and receive public records requests for polling lists and lists of absentee ballots received. Data has been reviewed and records checks have begun. The town has engaged a law firm of Gamage and Burnham, which firm has experience in election matters. The investigation into voting irregularities is ongoing. A recent look at the voter registration reveals over 30 voters listed as residents with either La Posa South or La Posa North LTVAs as addresses. Since these are finite places where you can only live a certain amount of time, that definitely creates some questions. Since this is an area that closes, how do residents live there? There is one of many questions that needs to be answered. I will be updating the council regularly as to our progress.
You have to get a summer pass. I know I have one.
I need a motion on the consent agenda.
Consent agenda, items 1, 2, 3, this got 7. Section 1, 2, 3, and 4 as
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Going to new business. Presentation of town of court sites audit report.
Morning. My name is Scott Graff. I'm with Colby and Powell CPAs. We're a CPA firm out of Gilbert, Arizona. We're the auditors for the town court site. Everybody should have received in their packet previously a draft copy of the audit report, and also there's 2 reports that I sent you. One of them was related to governmental auditing standards report. Today, we gave you a bound copy, so we're going to refer to the bound copy as well without filling those out. We're going to look at a few things related to the audit. For your information, I've been part of the audit team. I'm a partner at Colby and Powell. I've been in charge of the audit for the town court site, I believe, dating back to 2004. So I've had the experience with court site. I've been able to see changes with court site, changes with utilities, a lot of different things over the time. So it gives me a little perspective when I do the audit. I want to talk about the findings on the audit. We're going to jump right into what we found. If we can turn to the report that says report and schedules required by governmental auditing standards. Can everybody find that? This report, this actually has 2 reports in it. You'll see letters in there that have my letterhead on it. Those are what we call opinion pages. decide as our opinion. Those are what we decide is what are the results of the audit. The first letter that you're going to look at is based on policies, internal controls, compliance with state laws and regulations. The second report is what we call a single audit report. A single audit report is when you have federal funds and grants that you expend for certain purposes. Anytime you expend more than $500,000 in federal expenditures, you're required to have additional audit work done. It requires that auditors select programs and test for special circumstances over compliance, whether they're eligible, whether the costs are applicable to the grant, and various different compliance requirements. So we did do a single audit for that issue. The results on the audit for the compliance over the federal funds came out with no compliance problem. Everything was in compliance according to the grant document, according to the rules for that federal grant. So just want to report that there were no findings related to the federal program. And for those that want to know, it was the federal program was over the beautification projects in Plymouth Road and 12 Graff. The governmental auditing standards audit is one where we actually look at internal controls over financial reporting and compliance related to state statutes. We did find some findings related to those items. I'd like you to turn to page 8 of that same report, and they'll have a list of all the findings that we came up with. They're listed by item number. Item number 11-01. 11 represents the year of the finding. And before I go any further, I want to make sure that we're talking about the June 30th, 2011 audit. So that all this relates to the findings related to that date, June 30th, 2011. And we realize we're all the way into May of 2012, so it doesn't relate to anything that happened from June 30th, 2011 to current date. It's up to the date of the audit period. So let's look at the finding 11-01. What we're going to read is just the paragraph that says cause and effect. 11-1 is a finding related to review of utility billing adjustments. And it says, under cause and effect,
it's this meeting actually legal.
the town's unwritten procedures require monthly
Why
reviews
can't it be
and
true?
approvals of all billing adjustments.
Well, we give the tape to the state attorney general's office and we have them all criminally charged. He gave them a warning.
However, during the period of audit,
So
not
why
all
did that
billing
attorney
adjustments
sit there and
were
say it
reviewed.
wasn't? No, what he said was, he said it's my belief we can continue. But he's an attorney, he knows damn well it's
So
not.
what we're talking about is putting together all
But he said before, it's legal until the judge says otherwise.
the review of billing adjustments. See what happens in towns that are similar size to Portside is you don't have the ability to hire a number of staff to make sure all duties are segregated. So it requires checks and balances with the staff that you do have. And so we recommend that if somebody is collecting a utility bill, that they don't have the ability to write off somebody else's account. And if they do have that ability to write off an account, that an approval process has to be taken place. And policies are unwritten policies did require reviews of those utility billing adjustments. However, we're recommending that those be written. Item 11-02 is really what I'm talking about in relation to written policies. County policies and procedures. Cause and effect, which reads, over the years, the county has incorporated policies and procedures to maintain internal controls and effective procedures over their accounting processes. However, current internal controls and procedures have not been documented in formal written procedures. The lack of written procedures may result in inefficiencies through common usage and during times of employee turnover. So you can have systems in place, but when there's employee turnover, like that has occurred recently, the new people don't have anything written to know what to follow. If one person were to leave, then everybody could fill them in on the verbal policy of how to do things. But we recommend that good accounting would require accounting policies and manuals to be written. That way, the document is what's to be followed. So that's the finding for the next finding. The third finding is related to a state statute concerning highway user revenue fund spending. And statute's Article 9, subsection 14, it requires that highway user revenue fund monies be used for highway and street purposes only. Let's go ahead and read cause and effect. The town pools cash resources from all areas of unrestricted and restricted sources to pay for the town's operating and debt service expenditures. Although restricted monies are pooled with unrestricted monies are accounted for through the restriction of fund balances. Due to cash shortages in town's unrestricted funds, cash resources from restricted highway user revenue fund monies have been borrowed. Recent developments from audits of various towns by the state of Arizona Office of the Auditor General have concluded that the loan of highway user revenue fund money constitutes the spending, which is not allowable under the Arizona revised statutes. Of course, we may recommend that management should cease borrowing from the highway user revenue fund money to implement a formal plan to pay the money back to the highway user revenue fund. So those are the findings. Briefly, I just want to talk about the HURF monies. If you don't understand that, the town pulls all of its cash together. They receive revenues from many different sources. Some of the sources are restricted. Some of the sources are unrestricted. It goes into a cash account. It's accounted for by fund. That's how governments account for the restrictions. They keep the funds separate. Highway user revenue fund is a separate fund. It has accumulations of fund balances. So as revenues exceed expenses, it accumulates into a fund balance. So you know what you have to spend. You always know what you have to spend for restricted sources. You know where your balance is. Over time, all the cash that's been accumulated by all these different sources, it gets spent for general fund purposes, but mostly in the town court sites area for sewer and water type expenditures. And starting in 2007, your highway user revenue fund was paid down, was paid off there at zero. You didn't owe any amounts. Nothing was loaned from that fund. But in 2008, 2009, 2010, there were borrowings from the highway user revenue fund, which according to new information that we've been able to acquire from the Auditor General is they consider that as spending. If you loan it, they consider it spent. Okay. The fund balance remains the same. If we didn't spend the fund balance, but we loaned some of the cash out, and the Auditor General has taken a stand that that's spending, and that's not allowed, and it's not a proper use of highway user revenue funds. For your information, as you make more money through general fund type items, through sewer and water charges, the more money that you make, that pool gets bigger. The pool that we're talking about of unrestricted gets bigger, thereby paying back the highway user revenue fund. So it's hard to understand. It's not specifically you're going out and writing a check from some account and calling it a loan. It's just a process of spending money. When you run out of unrestricted funds, the next fund available is restricted. So we recommend that you put together a formal plan to find a way to pay that back. Now, comparing last year, larger amount owed to the highway user revenue fund. This year, that balance went down approximately $260,000. So when you compare last year to this year, you've made progress, you have borrowed in addition, you have paid back over the last year. So you have a feather in your cap, that although you still have a finding because you still have a loan, you've made appropriate steps to increase sewer and water fees, because ultimately, that's where all that borrowing went to, sewer and water. You've made appropriate steps to generate the revenues necessary to start paying back the highway user revenue fund. That still has to remain in place, a constant understanding that you still owe that fund, and that through budgeting your expenses and generating revenues, you're going to make progress in paying that off. Now, I've gone through a lot. I haven't opened it up for questions yet. Do you have any questions?
I think we're on track unannounced.
I can tell you that as far as the procedures go, we have put quite a bit in writing.
Yeah.
With especially the utility adjustments. They're required to be signed off by no less than 2 people, depending on the amount, as many as 4, before those things are done. And that's a written policy. So discoveries of some utility adjustments won't happen again. They're all checked and balanced. So we've also developed some other cash handling procedures that are in place in writing now. And we've obtained some, actually it was you that gave us something to go with that we can work and adapt to our policy. So we've made quite a bit of progress there.
Remember, that document is something that needs to be looked at often as things change, as you add new personnel, as you reduce your staff, whatever changes, you need to adapt that policy and make sure it fits. You need to make sure your internal controls work within the policy, the written internal control policy.
Yes, I would like to note in items 1101, 1102, and 1103, our response from the town was they agree with the findings and they will take the steps to correct.
Very good. Thank you, Gavin.
Any other question?
I'll just add a couple of things for your information. You probably already know all this information, but when you look at the cost of the sewer and water fund, you can actually turn to page 11 of your first report, the actual annual financial statements. This is not so much audit related, but just pointing out some things on financial statements. You can look at page 11. Page 11 is an income statement of your water fund and your sewer fund. And so you can see what type of revenues you bring in. You can see your total operating expenses. You see what your net operating income or loss is. In this case, for June 30th, 2011, where that period that ended that date, the water fund had a loss of $134,874 just for operations. But on top of that loss, we got to add an interest expense, which is not an operating expense. And that, you look at your financing of the debts related to your water and sewer, your interest expense is combined $347,000. So there's a lot to, it just shows that you have a new system, that you finance the great majority of it. It shows where you have to come up with your fees to cover those costs. What it doesn't show on this report, this doesn't show you the principal paid. On a cash flow statement, it tells you that principal paid on notes was $201,000. So you're talking over $500,000 that you have in just debt service for those water and sewer funds. So having an increase, which I believe was March of 2011, we're looking at a statement that shows as of June 2011. So the increase is only reflected in a few months of the year. That I'm very interested in seeing what it will look like at June 30th, 2012, and how that affects the HURF fund balance in paying that back. Because I think the intention of the town council was to pay back the HURF fund by generating the appropriate amount of revenues through the sewer water. I'll stop now, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think we've already have taken steps to remedy everything that you have brought to us. We've already got things in place, and I think this is going to, you'll see a reflection of that in June, and I think this is not this June, but 2012. And I know that this council has worked very hard to do that, and the staff has worked very hard to do that, and I want to thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. We enjoy working with the town and hope to keep a long relationship. Thank you.
Okay. Item 2.
This is discussion and possible action to fill a vacant council position pursuant to Town Code Section 2-4-1, which states that, quote, "The council shall fill a vacancy that may occur by either of the following. 1, appointment for the unexpired term. 2, appointment until the next regularly scheduled council election if the vacancy occurs more than 30 days before the nomination petition's deadline," unquote. The council may go into executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A 1, 38-431.03A 3, and or 38-431.03A 4.
I need a motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn to executive session to handle this.
Okay, I have a motion as a second.
Second.
We have a motion second.
Before you vote, I would suggest that the motion be that you retire in the executive session rather than adjourn,
Okay.
because the meeting can still be ongoing.
Let me amend it, we retire to executive session.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any discussion? Okay.